Hey, it's Matt at RuffHouse Studios, and welcome to Cannabasics. Today we're going to learn a technique to have fresh-baked cannabis cookies every day of the week. Now, this is more of a technique than it is a recipe per se. I'm just going to kind of go through the basics of what you need. We're actually going to be using a box kit or a prepackaged mix of cookie. And so the cookie mix, you would just follow the directions. We're using a 17.5 ounce size Betty Crocker. We're also going to be using some butter, some cannabis infused ghee, and an egg. Now, as I said before, this is more of a technique than it is a recipe. So when it comes to making the dough, you're basically going to follow the directions on the package, except for you're going to swap out the oil with some sort of a cannabis-infused oil. I'm using this cannabis-infused ghee and a little bit of butter, 1/3 cup of ghee, 2 tablespoons of butter to equal the 1/2 cup of softened butter the recipe called for. But whatever recipe or whatever mix you're using, you can alter your recipe. This one, for instance, you could use cannabis-infused oil, but you would add in a little bit of water. So just follow the directions and sub out the oil for the ratio that you want. Add in a little bit of regular butter along with the cannabis butter, just because the cannabis butter I'm using is really strong infusion, and I don't want it to be overpowering. And then I want some actual good butter flavor in there as well. And make sure dough is a kind of a stiff, good cookie dough that you can form into a ball like that. Once you have it mixed, you're ready to move on to the next step. Now we're getting into sort of the new territory of what we're going to need to do to make these cookies where that you can store them and then cook them every day, instead of just cooking all one big batch at once. But much like regular cookies, I'm going to be using a little scoop here. It's a 1 tablespoon, but I'm overfilling it. So it's kind of a heavy, a rounded tablespoon. And I'm going to portion these all out, and I'm only leaving about a 1/2 inch space because we're not going to be baking them now, but I do have a parchment-lined baking sheet that I'm doing this in. And once I have them all portioned out, I'm going to even them out, and now this is the important step, we're going to cover them with a piece of parchment paper, and then I'm going to flatten them. I'm going to make them about a 1/2 inch thick. And what you want to do is I've got a little lip on the pan that's kind of helping me guide, but just make them about a 1/2 inch thick and as even across as you can. The reason we're doing this is because we want to avoid what you see on the left there, a cookie that's overcooked and still never even melted fully down. Okay, so now we have our cookies formed out, but what we're going to do now is to freeze them. We're going to freeze them nice and hard for a couple of hours. And what this is going to be able to do is to make us be able to package them so that we'll be able to store them over time, because the idea here is to have an easy way to throw some cookies in the oven every day. So now that the cookie pucks are frozen, we're going to store them. And so what I'm using is this little container here, and I'm going to stack them with layers of parchment paper between them, 6 at a time. I may cook them, I like about 3 cookies myself for like a really good high before bed that helps me sleep through the night with my back pain. So I'm going to do layers of 6, and I'm going to save back 6 of them to cook now. Now, when it comes to cooking them, I like to cook them on parchment paper too, and there's some steps you want to do as well here. You can see they're really frozen now, they're crystalline, but you need to preheat your oven. So what I want to do is put the cookies on your parchment before you preheat the oven, and then let the oven preheat like fully for 10 minutes at 375, and let the cookies stay out and they won't come fully to room temperature, but they'll warm up some. And then we'll put them in the preheated oven. That's important because you want them to be hot enough to melt fully, but then also cook in a reasonable amount of time. It takes about 9 to 12 minutes. And you want to keep an eye on them the whole time because ovens vary, and so you want to keep an eye on them more than anything. And you want to take them out when they might look a little underdone. The top will not be fully set, but around the edges will be starting to turn brown. You don't want to overcook your cookies because they become really brittle. And you need to let them sit in the pan at least 5 minutes before you try to move them onto a cooling rack. And you want to let them fully cool off before you eat them if you want them to be kind of crunchy. But these are going to be a little chewy, a little crunchy, and delicious any night of the week. Hope you enjoyed this little tip. If you did, hit the like button. And visit RuffHouseStudios.com for hundreds of cannabis culture videos made just for you. This is Matt from RuffHouse Studios. Thanks for watching.